This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Good morning, everyone. We're continuing in Mishna Berura, Daf Hashavua, Siman, Mem Zayin, Seif, Beis. Siman, Mem Zayin, Seif, Beis. Tzarech levarech, bein lemikra, bein lemishna, bein legemara. Haga, bein lemedrash. One is required to make Birchas Hatorah, whether for Chumash, for Mishnah, for Gemara, or Medrash. Why does the Rama add Bein Lemedrash? The Mishna Berura says the Mechaber Gam Kein Moeduzeh. The Mechaber agrees that one has to say Birchas Hatorah for Medrash. El Desfile du Bechlal Mikra. It's part of Mikra. What about Medrash Rabbah or Kabbalah? The Aruch HaShulchan is mesupik if you have to make Birchas Hatorah. Could be the Chiyuv is only books that are Mefaresh Dinei HaTorah, as opposed to Svarim that are not to explain the Dinim. I would have thought that it applies irrespective to what chelek of Torah it is. Why would it matter whether it's dinim or midrashim? There are a lot of hanhagos we learn out from medrash. So, okay, the Kaf HaChaim indeed says that you have to make a bracha on everything. There's a very interesting chida. By the way, the Dirshu brings down, what if you're learning dikduk? If you're learning dikduk and the sefer is written by tzaddikim, and it's dikduk that assists in the learning of, gives you the tools to understand mikra, you have to make Birchas Hatorah. There's a very interesting chida. The chida writes in Avodas HaKodesh that when you learn Mishnah, you should understand what you're saying, because some say if you don't know the Perush HaMilos, it's not considered learning. So this is very important. In general, when it comes to Talmud Torah, Mikra does not require Havana. Mishnah requires baseline Perush HaMilos. Meaning, if you would translate the words of a Mishnah and yet have no idea what the Mishnah is talking about, which is very simple to do, right? In other words, just knowing the translation of the words of the Mishnah doesn't mean you understand what the Mishnah is saying, but that's still B'chlal Limud. But by Mikra, you don't even have to understand the words. Reading the words themselves is considered learning. Sif Gimel, HaKoisev B'divrei Torah, Afal Pi She'enoi Koirei Tzarech Levarech. One who writes Torah, even though he's not reading it, he has to make Birchas Hatorah. We're going to see Hirhur Einoi Tzarech. Let's read Sif Dalet. Hirhur B'divrei Torah Einoi Tzarech Levarech. Being Maharer in Torah, you do not have to make Birchas Hatorah. By the way, we're going to see the Gra was makbid even by Hirhur. That's why it's worthwhile to make Birchas Hatorah before you go to shul in the morning, because what else are you supposed to think about on the way? I mean, okay, you have the Sheish Mitzvahs Zechira T'midiyos, right? By the way, pay careful attention to what we're about to say. What could a person do on the way to shul? You have Sheish Mitzvahs T'midiyos, right? Then you have Hareini Mekabel Alatzmi Mitzvahs HaSeif Shall V'Yahavta L'Recha Kamaycha. Then there's a kavana that you're mechavein whatever you do today is L'Shem Shamayim. Then you're mechavein that whenever you say Hashem's name, it should be with the kavana of Adon Koil Hoy Hoy V'Viyah. Whenever you say Elokim, it should be with the kavana of Takif U'Bala Yicholos U'Bala Koichos Kulam. And then the Talmud Devarah says you should be makasher yourself to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov b'machshava, b'dibur, v'maisa, b'machshava in your thoughts. B'dibur when you say va'ani b'roiv chasacha Avraham, avoy beisecha eshtacha v'Yitzchak, el heichal kodesh b'yosecha is Yaakov Avinu. And then you have to make sure every day you're makasher yourself to tshuva. But after that, what are you supposed to do? So that's why you have to make sure you say Birchas Hatorah. This way you could be mahar b'Torah on the way. So there's a big kasha nachroinim. Okay, why is it that when you write Torah, the mechaber paskins, you have to make Birchas Hatorah, and when you think Torah, you don't have to make Birchas Hatorah? Yeah, again, the gra is machmer. But what's the difference between hear her lav kedibur dami? Well, neither is ksiva. Ksiva is not kedibur dami. So why do you have to make for ksiva and not for hear her? Says Mishna Berura. HaKoisev, Svirale de Ksiva Adaf Meher, Vahatam, Yesha Mishum de Aven Maisa. V'yeshamrim, that's the Shita of the Lavush. V'yeshamrim de Derech HaKoisev Lahoitzi Tevis Mifah B'Shas Ksiva. That it's typical to say the words while you're writing. V'cholza b'koisev Saram La'atzmai Derech Limudai. That's all if you're writing books for yourself as you're learning. Umevin mashu kosev, you understand what you're writing. Avol soifer hamatik, but a scribe that's just copying over in vakish lahavin, he's not even trying to understand. Ein sarch levarech, he does not have to make Birchas Hatorah. The ein zalimo, this is not considered learning. V'kol shekain, certainly im kosev is a pasuk b'igeres harashus ledaber tzachos ein sarch levarech. Certainly, if you're writing a pasuk in the course of your writing, to write in a smooth way, like let's say my grandfather, when he would talk, he spoke in psukim. He wasn't trying to learn, that's just the way he spoke. When he got to a red light, he would say, Vayomer Edoim loy savar bi. You know? That's how he talked. If we were about to go on a highway, he would say, Derech hamelech nelech. That's not learning, that's how they used to speak. That does not require Birchas Hatorah. By the way, which is very interesting, because if you're davening, saying psukim derech tachnunim, you do have to say Birchas Hatorah. But if you're just, or maybe here it's more lenient because you're just writing. Ule'inyan masa. Halacha l'maisa. Skimu achronim, the achronim conclude, shaloi lismay chadasim mechaber, not to rely on the mechaber, levarich ala ksiva levada b'chol gavne, just to write, to make a bracha on writing. Shari mikomakem inarak mehar b'divrei Torah, because at the end of the day you're just thinking. Ela roi l'chol koisei b'divrei Torah, it is appropriate for anyone who's writing that he should say some of the words to save himself from bracha vatala. If he's not going to say the psukim of Birchas Kayanim, in other words, if you're just writing, don't rely on the Shita of the Mechaber, that writing alone warrants Birchas Hatorah. I want to come back to the original question. Why does Mechaber Paskin Ksiva requires Birchas Hatorah, and Hirhur, one is not required to make Birchas Hatorah? I once saw a unbelievable tshuva, Shailas Tshuvas Shev Yaakov, of one of the Achronim, Rabbi Yaakov Katz. He says something like this. He says that a chelek of limud is lalamed. There are four components of learning: lilmod, lalamed, lishmar, v'lasos. And therefore, when we want to identify, is this full-fledged learning, we have to ask ourselves, can you be mekayim harbatzas Torah through this form of learning? Mamela, the Shev Yaakov says, by Hirhur, where there's no way to be melamed al yedei Hirhur, it does not require Birchas Hatorah. But Ksiva, where you can be mekayim lelamed al yedei Ksiva, so then that does require Birchas Hatorah. Sif Daled. Hamahar b'divrei Torah not tzarich levarach. Says Mishna Berura, the hero lav kedibur dami. Thinking is not like speaking. What about if you hear words of Torah? So that famously Shulchan Aruch Harav says, you have shomea ka'oina. When you're learning with a chavrusa, it's shomea ka'oina. By the way, the Shulchan Aruch Harav paskins that when a person is learning and they don't say the words, they're not mekayim the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. So he asks, so what do you do if you're learning with a chavrusa? So he says shomea ka'oina. Very shver, because then it would come out if you're on a shiur on Zoom, you're not mekayim the mitzvah of Talmud Torah, because you're not saying the words, and you can't say shomea ka'oina through electronic impulses. You're not hearing my words. The words are translated into electronic signals and then reconstituted into sound. So the Rav Shlomo Zalman has a different take on this. Rav Shlomo Zalman says that it's not absolutely required to say the words. And the reason why it's considered learning when you learn with chavrusa is kach derech halimud. Sometimes Ruvain says and sometimes Shimon says. Sometimes the Rebbe says, sometimes the Talmud asks. But you don't need a lumdus of shomea ka'oina. That's the tzura of Talmud Torah. I guess that's the more standard, plausible approach. I guess that's more the Neskabel approach. Anyway, the Mishna Berura says, those who are learning Be'iyon, even the Shulchan Aruch Harav, by the way, agrees that if you're learning something in depth and to say the words which stir your analysis, you're not required to. But you should be careful to say some words. If you don't say psukim after the bracha, which is the minhag. The Ramah says, you're also allowed to paskin halacha without giving a reason for it. Says the Ran Parakama, the Shabbos Parakal Slumim, Kasav Dahave Kehur. Meaning, if somebody asks a paisek, no, what's halacha in this case? Does he have to say, I didn't say Birchas Hatorah, or is he allowed to say mutter, asar? He's allowed to say mutter, asar. Says Mishna Berura, Di Yachal Nira Dafka Lipsak Din Bein Balei Dinen. It's Dafka talking about the paskin a din among litigants, the Enoi Derech Limud, Aval Lilmai Din B'Sefer B'li Tam, to learn halacha in a sefer without giving reasoning, mevarech. Then you do make a bracha. D'loi gara mekai seif. It's no worse than writing, where the mechaber paskins you have to say Birchas Hatorah. The reason why you're allowed to paskin, l'psuk shatam shu ikar hadin ein el mahar b'libai. The reason of the halacha, which is the primary element of the halacha, you're only thinking. Famously, the Gra argues on the Mechaber, and the Gra holds Hirur requires Birchas Hatorah Usvirole Deloy Garazeh Mehakari Mikra Balad Tzarich Levarich, that Hirur actually the Gra is going on paskening a din, and he holds that it's no worse than reading a pasuk in the Chumash that you have to make a bracha, va'afil b'hir levad machmer, and the Gra is even further machmer, not to think in learning before Birchas Hatorah shel lahar kozman shel Birchas Hatorah l'kulei alma, according to everyone, mutter lasois eze pu'ulas mitzvah kadem Birchas Hatorah. You're allowed to do a mitzvah before Birchas Hatorah. As I'm taking my lulav, I'm thinking, I have to have kavana. We mitzvah shvichas kavanos. I have to be mechavein to be mekayim the mitzvah dairaisa. And I'm thinking, well, am I holding in the right hand and am I holding in the right makom? That's okay. You're allowed to do mitzvahs before Birchas Hatorah. Afagav de beis ma'is v'vadi mahar b'din zeh fil hachimuter de kol she'enoi miskaven lalimud. If you're not mechavein for learning, ein tzarich bracha. You don't need a bracha because you're not mechavein for learning. You're not mekayim the mitzvah anyway, because mitzvah shvichas kavana. Unless even if mitzvah ain't shvichas kavana, it might be considered mesasek. But in any event, the Gra holds one should be machmer not to make Birchas Hatorah even before Hirur, but it is permitted to be mekayim mitzvahs before Birchas Hatorah. Okay, Be'ez Hashem, tomorrow we'll pick it up in Seif Hey. Have a great day, everyone. Kol Tov.
So, remember the example of Lula mentioning.
Yeah.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.